So Joe Biden gave a press conference last week, and he discussed the infrastructure deal, the economy, and a number of things. And he had some moments that went pretty viral. Let me show you one of them here.
Problem is I disappoint you because I can't answer all your questions and negotiate with you before I negotiate with my colleagues. But I really think the public understands, and they're seeing. The proof is in what's happening. It's now projected our economy is going to grow above 7% this year. Projections from Wall Street to the Fed is going to continue to grow. We're going to increase more, and guess what? Remember you were asking me, and I'm not being critical of y'all, I really mean this. It was legitimate questions you're asking me. Asking me, well, guess what? Employers can't find workers. I said, yeah, pay them more. This is an employees bargaining chip now. What's happening? They're going to have to compete and start paying hardworking people a decent wage.
So there's an aspect here where I'm going to be very critical of Biden because what he's saying is absurd in a number of ways. I'll get to that. But first, the part that he's completely right about. So he's right that the dialogue in mainstream media, the dialogue in elected Republican circles, and the dialogue among a lot of corporate Democrats is this panic, this idea of like, oh my God, maybe we are paying workers too much, maybe we are paying unemployed people too much. We should cut back on the unemployment benefits. We shouldn't have given out so much in stimulus. We definitely shouldn't cut another stimulus check. All I'm hearing is that there's all these jobs open and people don't want to go work those jobs. So my only conclusion is that people obviously are incredibly lazy. That's the dominant narrative that's taken over the country. And you hardly find anybody who dissents from that except on independent media. Now, by the way, that totally doesn't tell you the whole picture because, and we'll get to a story on this later, there are millions and millions and millions of people who lost their job as a result of the pandemic and haven't gotten a penny in unemployment, even though they've gone through all the proper channels and filed the right paperwork. And the systems are so antiquated and so primitive and so terrible that they can't get the help out to people when they desperately need it. So nobody tells you about that aspect of it. This silent crisis we have where there are people out there, good people, hardworking people, who are getting absolutely hosed. There are also people who are getting evicted during the eviction moratorium. That's something that Jordan Chariton from Status Quo has been reporting on, and he's been interviewing a lot of these people. We have homelessness increasing. And by the way, if there is anybody who's gotten the stimulus money and is getting some unemployment money or whatever it may be, and they were working a job that they hate, and now they have a little bit of time to reevaluate and potentially look for a job that they actually like. You know what I say to that? Good. Good. Now, maybe there's some tiny percentage of the population that truly is the stereotype of like, yeah, if you give me the bare minimum, I'm going to totally check out mentally. Okay. To them, I say, that's fine. Go ahead. Whatever percentage it is, 1%, 2%, 4%, but we're not really talking about anything more than that. So this notion that we should talk about this 1% or 2% who might fit this stereotype, when there's like 98 or 99% that do not fit that stereotype and are just good people just trying to get by, and there's people who are getting totally hosed by the system, and there's people who might have gotten the stimulus check and gotten some unemployment assistance, and it's not that they're lazy, they just want a half-decent job so they don't waste their lives doing something they don't want to do. I think that's a positive thing. So the media narrative is messed up on this, the Republican narrative, the corporate Democratic narrative, it's all messed up. So Biden is correct by saying, oh, you want people to get back to work? Pay them more, dipshits. And we have facts to back this up. So there's a ice cream store in Pittsburgh. There was a great piece that was written on this. They raised their wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour, and they got over 1,000 applications instantly. And by the way, they stopped counting at 1,000. They were like, okay, we literally can't go through all these. May have been 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 applications. All they did was raise their wage from $7.25 to $15, and boom, instantly also, look, turns out people aren't so lazy when you offer a living wage. Wow, shocker. Now, more examples. There's a great Washington Post article that lays this all out. There's this company called the Fifth Street Group. They own 5 restaurants. They're mostly in Charlotte and Charleston. And get this, quote, the company raised the starting wage for all of its staff to $15 an hour, up from $12 an hour to $13 an hour. And it created a Tip the Kitchen program, adding a second line to table checks for gratuity for the back of the house staff, which the restaurant matches up to $500 per night. That move has increased wages for non-tipped employees, such as line cooks and dishwashers, to an average of $23.80 an hour. Applicants began pouring in nearly overnight, the owner, Whalen, said. A manager at one of his restaurants, Tempest, told him that 10 people walked in to drop off resumes over the course of 1 week after the policy change, compared with just 15 people over the 4 previous months. Within 3 weeks, the restaurant group went from about 50 to 60% staffed to nearly fully staffed. Wow, shocking. Now, by the way, credit to this guy, because apparently he's the owner of these 5 restaurants, and he heard tangentially, overhearing a conversation from some of the workers in the kitchen, that one of the guys was struggling to afford necessities. I forget what it was. It was like maybe school supplies for their kid or something along those lines, or making rent, and he just had a light bulb moment like, oh my God, my industry's broken. These people can't survive, and they're working full time. And so he was like, okay, I'm going to pay $15 an hour, and I'm going to start the this program to tip the kitchen as well. And then now they're making $23.80 an hour, and people are like, damn, I would like to work there. Now, granted, listen, you could fire back and say, these are all anecdotal. Fair enough, but I got a lot of them. And after a while, if you add up thousands and thousands and thousands of anecdotes, it actually becomes solid empirical evidence. So they go on to explain there's grocery stores that had a similar story, pizza shops that had the same story. And it's just, yes, he's saying raise wages. When people raise wages, people get back to work. Not that complicated. So if that's really what you want, then raise the wages. And you could say, hey, maybe some can afford it, some can't afford it. Fair enough. Believe me, many more can afford it than they're letting on, for sure. But even for the ones that can't, okay, well, that's where good government policy comes in. And maybe you set up some sort of a system where you subsidize the small businesses that can't afford it, and you subsidize them with the condition that they have to hire people at that $15 an hour number. There are ways around this, man, to look out for the workers. And Biden's right. Now, finally, the employees have a bargaining chip when they didn't previously. That's a good thing. Why does everything always have to be framed from the perspective of the owner class? Why? But now here's the criticism of Biden. And this is obvious. You guys it was probably the first thing you thought of as you watched that clip. He's like, pay workers more. Hey, asshole, you're the president. You pay workers more. You left the $15 minimum wage out of the last reconciliation bill. Now, I get it. Biden makes the argument, I mean, God, there was 7 or 8 Democrats in the Senate who were against the $15 minimum wage. What am I going to do? I have no power. There's nothing I could do to change that. Nonsense. Politics isn't stagnant. It's fluid. It's always evolving. It's always changing. Take a page out of Lyndon B. Johnson's book, take a page out of FDR's book, and play the carrot or stick approach game. Call them into your office and say, I'll be your best friend or I'll be your worst enemy. You decide. If you vote for the $15 minimum wage, here's what you get, Joe Manchin in West Virginia. You get another military base, or you get extra infrastructure projects, or you get a position in my administration, or whatever it is. I'll give you whatever you want if you work with me and vote for the $15 minimum wage. If you don't, I'm going to be your worst enemy, and I'll find somebody to primary you, and I'll support them. I'll do a address from the Oval Office and call your ass out and say, you're the problem. You're against democracy. So that's what you do, and you do that with all the 7 or 8 Democrats who are against it. Now, by the way, if you twist their arm sufficiently or you give them enough to sweeten the deal, of course they'll change their mind. And naturally, shame on the lefties in the House for not voting together as a block. You could have gotten 12 of them to vote together and say, we're literally not voting for a single package unless it has the $15 minimum wage in it. And then that would light a fire under Biden's ass where he knows, I got a better chance of changing 8 people's minds than I do of changing 12 people's minds, so let me get to work on the 8 people. I mean, that's everybody, at every level, people failed. The 8 Democrats were being against it because they're corrupt sellouts. The 8 Democrats who were against raising the minimum wage, they all take a lot of money from corporations, which is why they have that position. It's not some ideological position that they came to when they reasoned through it. Nonsense. So screw them. Screw the lefties in the House for not voting as a block and trying to force the issue. And screw Biden because he shouldn't even need the lefties in the House to force him. He should have been like, I'm for $15 minimum wage, so this is what I'm going to do. And he didn't do it. So he's telling businesses, hey, why don't you voluntarily raise to $15 an hour? How about you pass a law saying we have a $15 minimum wage, and then they have to do it? How about that, Joe? So anyway, that's my breakdown of this. He's right, but also he could have done something about it, and he didn't do anything about it. Now, by the way, I'm a reasonable guy. If he tried everything he could and he still didn't get it, I'd tell you that. And I'd be like, he tried everything he could and he couldn't get it, so he's right. You can't blame him. You can't blame the Democrats. You got to blame the individual employers, and hopefully they do raise it to $15 an hour. But he didn't try everything. In fact, he didn't try anything. And so, of course, I'm going to blame him because the buck stops with him. So, oh, man. What are we going to do? Democrats have this mind virus where they love to say things that are decent and then never act on it. Go read the Twitter feed of any of the lefty Congress people. Each tweet, it's banger after banger. Everything's just, they're spitting fire all day about whatever, healthcare system, wages, you name it. And then, when it comes time to actually fight for it and do stuff for legislation, they're scared of their own shadow and they don't do dick. They don't lift a finger. They don't play hardball. And this is an example of Joe Biden doing that. Raise the wages. I like higher wages. Really? What about with the legislation where you could put the higher wages in it? See, what happened was me and Craig and them was down by the Safeway, and we saw that somebody was coming down the thing, and we just made sure that we had to hide in the corner before we got around to the thing, and Steve and them was there with us, and that's why we was... New phone, who dis? Obnoxious, man. Super obnoxious. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.